Welcome to the Australia Today. I am Dr. Amit Sarwal, editor. The basic question that we are going to ask today relates to freedom of expression, especially journalists who become targets of extremists. Our question is: are journalists in the gunsights of a new generation of Khalistani extremists? And to discuss it with us, we have a guest that is well known in Canada. We came to know him through his book. Terry, welcome to the Australia Today.
I'm very glad of the opportunity. Thanks for the invitation.
Now, Terry is the author of Blood for Blood, 50 Years of the Global Khalistan Project. He is a retired senior correspondent for CBC in Canada. Terry, uh, you have been you have gone through basically what we are starting to go through right now. You have received death threats, cyberbullying, not just from the old guard of the Khalistani movement, but also from the new wannabe thugs of the Khalistani movement. How do you deal with the stress?
Mostly by ignoring it. For a long time, they've been full of threats and no action. And what usually happens is that some young thugs post some semi-literate death threat on some obscure website, and sometimes they graduate to Twitter. And they say, bullets are cheap, it's Milewski's turn. And it's not very subtle stuff. One put on Facebook some years ago, they started with, it's time to find out where Milewski lives and put his head on a stick. And I was supposed to quake in my boots. And I guess the idea was to stop me writing what I was writing. And of course, it had the opposite effect. I mean, most people, they don't just wordlessly cower away and stop saying what you want them to stop saying. Most people react and say, "No, I'm not going to put up with that." And I should emphasize, though, that I had always had a great advantage. That is that I was on TV. I was on TV for 40 years. Most nights on Canada's main network, the CBC, and its biggest national news show. That meant that, and people would see my stories, and that meant that if anything happened to me, it wouldn't be a big mystery, would it? Who might be behind it? Far easier to go after smaller fry, people who weren't well known, where you could say, well, who knows what enemies he may have had? All of Canada knew who my enemies were. There was going to be no mystery, so it was going to be problematic, let's put it politely, for anyone to actually take a shot at me. More recently, in recent years, I would say they became a bit more sophisticated. There was a delightful death threat quite recently, last year, on Twitter by a young radical in the UK, Ranveer Singh, who was found a member of the National Sikh Students Federation, who said that in English we say Terry Milewski, but in Punjabi we say, and then in Gurmukhi script, Lala Nagat Narain. Now you know what that means, but most readers of Twitter don't know what does that mean. They can't even read it, and even if they could read it, and somebody translate the Gurmukhi script, it's Lala Nagat Narain OZ. I mean, they wouldn't even get it. But of course, once you do get it, and you know that that was the name of a very famous journalist, politician, and critic of Bhindranwale back in the day, before the attack on the Golden Temple, long before that, and who was murdered, with Bhindranwale, of course, being the prime suspect, by a couple of goons on motorbikes who attacked his car on a back road. So, in other words, because I was a critic of the contemporary Khalistan movement, this young thug in the UK was cleverly tweeting that when he hears my name, he thinks of murder. So you can call that a little bit more sophisticated. I think, at least he was making an effort. And hey, we spelled my name right. Some of them can't even achieve that. We're not dealing with intellectual giants as a rule.
Yes.
But the one thing I would add, and I'm sorry for the long answer,
Yes.
the one thing I would add is that they have become more sophisticated in this sense that they'd
Hmm.
rather send lawyers after you
Hmm.
than men with guns.
Hmm.
Because they think that even if they fail, and they always fail, I mean, they've been after me countless times. Uh, I guess I could probably count how many lawsuits have been launched, and they never go anywhere. And it's all performative, so that somebody will write a story, say, "Aha, Milewski is being sued." Am I really? Where's the lawsuit, please?
Hmm.
You know, they file a statement of claim in the court and they waive it at a press conference, say, we're suing, we're going to get this guy. And the idea is that, you know, in the fullness of time, everyone will forget about it.
Hmm.
Nobody's asking, well, what happened to that lawsuit?
Hmm.
And it goes away. They never pursue it because it's not worth it. They don't have a case. I mean, what are they going to say? You said bad things about them. Okay, well, were they untrue? Well, let's have an adjournment.
Hmm.
So they try to play legal games with you,
Hmm.
and they've never succeeded. They've never got anywhere. So I have a lot less to worry about than somebody who is a private individual, is
Hmm.
not nationally known, who may, for all anyone knows, have all kinds of enemies. It's unclear. It is a genuine mystery, and who quietly tries to persuade people, perhaps not to display the martyr pictures of gun-toting assassins and terrorists at the local Gurdwara.
Hmm.
You know, if you quietly try to reason with people that, you know, this is not creating a good image for the Sikhs, and we should stop doing that, then you might meet some young men with baseball bats in a dark alley on your way home from work that night.
Hmm.
And that has happened to at least one friend of mine in Toronto, for example, Balraj Diol, who I've
Hmm.
mentioned in the book. 5 thugs with baseball bats and hockey sticks. They just about killed him. They left him for dead, and he was lucky that somebody stumbled on the scene and called an ambulance,
Hmm.
and he lived to tell about it. The people who are more obscure
Hmm.
and more exposed, more vulnerable than I am, have paid the price. I've got off lightly.
Now, we know you are famous, and Pannu from Six for Justice, a banned organization by India, has threatened the Australia Today team. So I assume that we are famous like Terry. Jay, can you just show us the video?
Uh, just have a look. Have a look.
Who committed genocide of Sikhs in March 1966? ਇਹ ਉਹੀ ਨਸਲ ਹੈ ਹਿੰਦੂ ਕੱਟੜਪੰਥੀਆਂ ਦੀ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਅੱਜ ਆਸਟ੍ਰੇਲੀਆ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਯੂਕੇ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਤੇ ਇੱਥੇ ਯੂਐਸ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਪਹੁੰਚ ਚੁੱਕੀ ਹੈ
So he's kind of calling us the offshoots of Hindu supremacists who have reached to Australia, and now because what we write as journalists, we should be targeted. And in the video, at the end of it, he makes a gesture of a gun this way to tell his followers what to do. So
Yes, this is Mr. Panun's big failing. He never fails to miscalculate. He's all about he will put together press releases every time he has one of his referendums, for example, in the UK, in Italy, in Geneva, in London, most recently in Melbourne, and as soon I think in Brisbane, I believe.
That's right.
And every time he starts off by saying all the right things, that we're all about democracy. He frequently says, we're for ballots, not bullets. And it sounds great. And then in the second paragraph, he tells you that he's naming the voting center for some ghastly mass murderer, completely contradicting everything he said in the first paragraph. We're all about democracy, he claims. And then he names the Canada headquarters of the referendum campaign after Talvinder Singh Parmar, the mass murderer who blew up Air India Flight 182 in 1985 and slaughtered 331 completely innocent civilians who had nothing to do with his war on India. a completely senseless terrorist atrocity, which is the worst on record. So he's Canada's worst mass murderer, and Panun goes public by naming Parmar as literally the poster boy, with a glamour shot of him on every poster, for the referendum campaign, which he says is entirely peaceful. Oh, we don't endorse violence. You just did. So every time he does that, and he does it every time, he makes a fool of himself. Most recently, I think, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think in Melbourne, he named the voting centre after Kehar Singh and Satwan Singh. Well, most Indians certainly will know that those were two of the assassins of Indira Gandhi in October of 1984. So once again, he's made a fool of himself. He can't say that they're all for peace and non-violence and democracy, and then say we're doing all of this in the names of our holy martyrs who are mass murderers.
Terry, I wanted to ask you that, if you look at the video, maybe he's not directly telling people that go and kill these people, but he's kind it seems trying to incite people to harm us because, he's put images there and then he is seriously should we take this threat in the sense that of course we need to be careful, but how seriously should we take this threat when it comes to our personal safety?
I think you should take it seriously. So your audio broke up, but I get the gist of your question, and it is an important one, because it's easy for us to sit here and say, well, this guy is a blowhard, he's making empty threats, he doesn't follow through with it, he values his own skin too highly to get into real trouble, and so don't worry about it. But that's not the right answer, because all of the violence does begin with loose talk. And a new generation which knows no better and knows very little about the history of the conflict, the history of India, what happened in 1984. They haven't studied it. It isn't taught at school. All they know about it, they've got from some other young thug that they met at the Gurdwara, and they move on from that. And they believe, for example, Panun has most recently said that the referendum is justified by the fact that the Sikhs have been suffering under a continuing genocide from the time of Indira Gandhi all the way through to Narendra Modi. Really? That's odd, to say the least, because the many millions of Sikhs who actually live in India, in Punjab and elsewhere, do not seem to have noticed this ongoing genocide. And it's almost hard to imagine how any Sikhs are left after this genocide has been going on for many decades now. Of course, it hasn't. But your point is that that we should focus on the loose talk, this crazy talk, because young kids who know no better believe it. And some of them will be crazy. It only takes one. Some of them will be crazy enough to act on it. So we should take it seriously, make a note of it, keep a copy, and warn people that this is the kind of talk that is going around and that maybe your kids are hearing.
Now,
I kind of interviewed a couple of young men here who are influenced with Khalistan propaganda, and rightly so, as you said, that they told me they have listened to the video of XYZ, the new Khalistani thugs, and that's how they know. And these are young men who are born in Australia, and they are kind of supporting Khalistan movement right now. And they are only influenced with the videos of Panus or Amritpals or others like them. So they don't go to the depth of it. And when you question them that this is not true, then they say, this is what we know.
Yes. And that is the problem, is that the reason that the Khalistan movement has been able to revive itself and to become relevant once again 30 years after it basically died out in India. Let's face it, it's been going nowhere for 30 years in India. And the reason it has been able to come back to life and to threaten people and to get people chanting Khalistan Zindabad in the streets of Switzerland and Italy and Germany and Australia, Canada, of course, never stopped. The reason is that it's cheap, it's free. I mean, time was, if you wanted to organize a rally, you had to phone a lot of people, get enough gasoline to get you and your friends to the rally. It's difficult and expensive. Now you just get down at your keyboard and you're a warrior. You're a great shaheed. You're a great man. You're threatening the evil Hindus who, and all you've been told is that Hindus are committing this unending genocide of the Sikhs. The other thing that, although I'm belittling them by describing their efforts on social media in this way, the fact remains, though, that they have been very effective in this sense. That they've been very consistent. Panoon is an example of this in conflating two words, Khalistani and Sikh. Their core pretense, and it is a pretense, it's absolute nonsense, is that they speak for the Sikhs, that the Khalistanis speak for the Sikhs. They are the voice, the legitimate, authentic voice of the Sikh community worldwide. And now, this is utter nonsense. I mean, all I need to do, many people in Canada don't know this. Many people in Australia probably don't know this. They're not aware because what they see on the TV, there's apparently this big movement in Khalistan, they're having a vote, blah, blah, blah. They're not aware of how pitifully low the support for the Khalistan movement is among Sikhs who live in India, and mostly, of course, in Punjab. If you ask them, they would be completely stunned to hear, for example, that in the Punjab elections last year, the only separatist party in the running, which is Simranjit Singh Man's splinter group of the Shiromani Akali Dal, his little splinter group was the only separatist party running, and he's allowed to run. He's free to run. He doesn't preach armed insurrection. He wouldn't be able to run if he was doing that. So it's a soft option, easy to support. And what support did he get? He got 2.5% of the vote and 0 seats. In Punjab, I'm talking about, in a Sikh majority state, 58% of the population is Sikh. In a Sikh majority state, a Hindu nationalist party, the BJP, got nearly 3 times as many votes as the Sikh separatist party. It's incredibly low level of support. And that's one thing that they try to obscure by suggesting, wrongly, again and again, so that it gets through to young minds, that Khalistan and Sikhs, those two words are the same thing. All Sikhs are Khalistanis. No, they're not by a long shot.
Now, Terry, one of the things that we have noticed is that, the SFJ video against the Australia Today team was released soon after Australian Prime Minister Albanese, who was in India and assured the Indian Prime Minister and the diaspora that attacks on Hindus' temples will not be tolerated. So vandalism of the temples, including any place of worship in Australia, won't be tolerated, and the attackers will meet the full force of the law. Do you think that somewhere our reporting rattled the Khalistani thugs who from USA and Canada thought that Australia is going to be an easy target because A, the mainstream media and the policymakers have no idea about what Khalistani movement is about, and they can conflate Khalistan is Sikh and Sikhs are Khalistan. B, is it because of our reporting that Australian lawmakers are now noticing Khalistan as a threat to Australian public as well, not just Indian diaspora, but also to a large number of other people? Because what we saw at Federation Square was a threat to general public as well, who were sitting around in restaurants, eating at cafes. And I'd like to show you the video of Albanese first, what Albanese said to Indian media.
Him the assurance that Australia is a country that respects people's faith, that we don't tolerate the sort of extreme actions and attacks that we've seen on religious buildings, be they Hindu temples, mosques, synagogues or churches. This has no place in Australia, and we will take every action through our police and also our security agencies to make sure that anyone responsible for this faces the full force of the law. We're a tolerant multicultural nation, and there is no place in Australia for this act.
Now, Terry, do you think that this would deter the Khalistanis? Is it all talk?
I think that the Khalistanis may secretly enjoy all of this because they're out for attention. And remember, don't give them too much credit. Remember that in the main, the guys who are outside the Federation Square with swords, going after Hindus who were in the neighborhood, and rallying to oppose the referendum. Those guys are looking for what we in North America call street cred, street credibility. They want to be known as the tough guys. It buys them entree into into looking like a leader in the community. Easier to get loans, buy a nice car. Remember that a lot of this is a lot simpler and more basic. These guys aren't really thinking at all, let alone thinking about glory and a geostrategic approach to how they can advance their cause. If they were taking a more strategic approach to advancing their cause by, for example, dropping the adulation and glorification of mass murderers as the signature tune of their movement, if they did that, then we might have a greater cause to worry. Personally, I think that what's got them riled up is partly, yes, reporting about it by you and others, but also the fact that the news, anyone's news program, they like a bit of violence. It's good for ratings, and these people supplied it by going after people with swords. And then, fortuitously, the timing just happened to work out. The Australian Prime Minister happened to be in India. And Prime Minister Modi raised this question with him, and his response was perfectly sound, it seems to me. My point is simply that I don't think we should give them too much credit for strategic planning. I think that a lot of this is young men looking to make a name for themselves in their gang, like young men always do.
Yeah. Pallavi has a question for you, I think. Pallavi, your mic is off.
I think Jay probably, Terry, my question to you is that we've seen what's been happening in Canada, where there's some sort of a political game going on as well. So one has the perception is that the politicians in Canada, at least some section of politicians, are very soft on this issue. But my question is that when one saw the violence in Federation Square at Melbourne, how is it that these people can take this for granted that nothing will be done against them? Do you reckon that, say, Australia is not catching on to what can happen potentially in the future, by looking at Canada's example? Or is it that they have yet not grasped the seriousness of this issue?
Well, I think it's a little bit of the latter. I think we all know that the seriousness of this issue has only recently arrived in Australia. I'm being polite. And it's understandable to me anyway. I mean, in Canada, of course, we've had this long and hideous history, which has left most Canadians with a pretty good understanding of the Khalistan movement. I'm referring, of course, to the insane bombing of Air India Flight 182 in 1985 by the Baba Khalsa, led by Talvinda Parmar, the poster boy for the referendum campaign in Canada. And it seems to me, at any rate, that the approach taken by Canadian politicians the softness, as you rightly put it, of Canadian politicians because they like the votes. They look the other way when the martyr posters go by in the Vaisakhi Day parade. They smile and clap and applaud. And I didn't know anything about who are these martyrs? I mean, there's some guy, with a beard and a turban, and his picture is on the side of a Vaisakhi float. What's wrong with that? Yeah, well, he's carrying a AK-47. Oh, well, I didn't notice that. That's what happens in real life. They pretend to be ignorant, and some of them, to be charitable, are genuinely ignorant. I don't think that's a very good excuse, but they are genuinely ignorant. They haven't bothered to look into it to discover why it is that so many other Sikhs don't want to go to that parade, and why so many Hindus are afraid of these people and don't want to cross them, because they see them as constantly on the edge of violence. So it seems to me that what Australia has been fortunate in most obviously is that they haven't had a history of beatings, killings, stabbings, explosions, terrorist attacks as we have in Canada. So we should have been, not that we should have been harder to fool. But I think now that they've had a glimpse of it, Australians should also be hard to fool, and should be less willing than the Canadians have, with bad results, to look the other way when these things happen.
Can I add something? See, how it is happening here in Australia is, for last 7 years or so, we probably didn't understand it the way it is happening right now. But for last 7 years, I can tell you, from 2015 onwards, they planned and strategically placed people and propaganda, kind of replicated what they did in Canada. They started those charitable organizations like Khalsa Aid, and they started kind of earning social credit among Australian people that whosoever they are kind-hearted, helping community and everything. Now, in return, why don't we let them do that parade in middle of the city where they can have their whatever they want to show off strength? And they started helping and supporting the local politicians here through money and muscle both. They take 20, 30, 40 people. Australia is a small country, for their political support when elections come or whenever needed. They do fundraisers for them. And in return, right now, after work of 5-6 years of this, what we face today is all Australian politicians are kind of indebted towards them, and they are very reluctant to come in public and criticize what's happening for last 4.5 months. How do we counter that, and how do we kind of expose that thing?
Well, to me, certainly the media has an important role here, and maybe the most important role. If politicians are in the front rank, it's for them to speak up about this and say, look, we're not going to come to your parades, and we're not going to come and speak to your meeting and pander to you for votes if you're going to go on praising Kahar Singh and Satwan Singh and every other murderer. And now it's Dilawar Singh, the suicide bomber who blew up the chief minister of Punjab in 1995. 95, by the way, this is after the supposed end of the Sikh Khalistani insurgency. It's possible for politicians to be braver, and they should be encouraged to do so by the sight of what happens when they fail. We had a notorious case in Canada not that long ago, 2018, I guess, when Jagmeet Singh, a Sikh, won the leadership of Canada's left-wing party, the New Democratic Party, the third party, which now holds the balance of power in the Canadian Parliament. They've got an arrangement with Trudeau's Liberals to run the country, as long as you keep being nice to the NDP, to our little party. So it's quite a muscular group. And after he was elected the leader, with a long history of identifying with Sikh fundamentalists and Sikh activists and condemning India as a hateful place and a murderous place, guilty of genocide and so forth. After that long history, he came on TV to be congratulated about his victory in winning the leadership of his party. And I happened to be hosting the show that day, and asked him, well, what do you think about these posters of Canada's worst ever mass murderer? And he's got life-size posters glorifying him on the side of a Gurdwara in Surrey, just across the street from where your campaign headquarters was for your leadership campaign. And he changed the subject. So I asked him again, and he changed the subject. Then I asked him again, and guess what? He changed the subject. So 5 times I asked him, and he wouldn't answer. He would not say, it's wrong, I condemn it. Which, when you think about it, is something rather incredible. Here's a democratic politician in a G7 country who doesn't feel comfortable saying anything bad about the glorification as a holy martyr and a model for Sikh youth of Canada's worst ever mass murderer. That's an astonishing thing. But, and here's why I raise it in answer to your question, it's not to toot my own horn, but to tell you what happened in the end. 5 months later, it was fairly painful because this interview was played again and again, and people chewed on it for quite a while. 5 months later, he reversed himself. To his credit, not every politician does this, and eventually says, you know what? Yeah, Parmar did it, and I accept it. He wouldn't even accept that Parmar was guilty. Which has been well established. I mean, Canada went through a decade of trials, a 4-year criminal trial, and a 4-year judicial inquiry by a retired Supreme Court justice. I mean, there wasn't any doubt about it. And he was saying, well, we don't know who blew up the plane. We have no idea. It's absolute nonsense. So, long answer again, and I apologize, but you can embarrass politicians. Politicians who try to have it both ways and who try to duck the question. Why are you going along with this? Aren't you supposed to be leading, not following? Politicians who duck that question, they can sometimes pay a price. It doesn't look good if you really turn the spotlight on them. That's your job. Go do it.
Now, Terry, one of the things that we have seen with attacks on the Australia Today is, SFJ, the Khalistani goons vandalize Hindu temples. They put it on social media. They tag us. They send us videos through private messages. They create our posters. And when we counter it with stories, facts, and quotations and some footage, they say it's an inside job. Hindus did it.
False
Indian
flag.
did it. So my question to you is, and I have been noticing, and Jitarth pointed out 2015, because my PhD is on South Asian diaspora in Australia, and I've looked at the history of Indians and South Asians from 1880s to 2010. That was the period of my PhD, and I've been looking and working on South Asian diaspora here. Somewhere I have noticed these extremists are using a very similar toolkit from Islamists. Yes. Organizations like Hamas, who have been waging a war against Israel through their own agendas, and how they work. Khalistani, the new generation of Khalistani movement, as you have pointed out, is digital. They're replicating the similar strategy. Dissociate Sikh history from Indian history, so that people believe that there was a Sikh nation even when India got independence. B, create a sympathetic network among left-leaning academics and journalists at Australian universities, even if they're not Punjabis, whites even better. And C, take support from left-leaning political parties like Jagmeet Singh's NDP. We have a certain group here who is supported by Pakistan origin MPs. D, try to get your own people, as Jitarth pointed out, into media particularly multicultural media, in under the quotas of diversity, and hide behind human rights and diversity, and become political advisors to mainstream parties, not just fund them, but become political advisors to political parties and even authorities, police, justice department. So when someone raises the issue, the complaint reaches to these politicians and police authorities, these advisors would be at the forefront on advising, and they will say, oh, it's nothing. They are just carrying out a parade. As you said,
Yeah.
it's just a parade, a float with some photographs. And don't look at the guns. It's just, kids. They are wearing jackets with Babar
Yeah.
Khalsa, and the logo is AK-47. I remember clearly because I'm Canadian resident as well. I clearly remember British Columbia, where there was a premier present, and when pointed out by media persons like you, that there were clearly Babar Khalsa jackets, the jeans jackets with guns, the symbol of Babar Khalsa, and they said,
Yeah.
"Oh, I won't look at it." I didn't. I clearly. I just. I was just shaking hands, looking at
Yeah.
babies, and then I left. I left within 1 hour or something like that. So,
Yeah.
do you think that these extremists, the new generation of Khalistani extremists, are using a same toolkit? Uh,
Yes, and they're being more successful by being quieter. They're being more successful when they are not doing crazy stuff like waving swords and yelling in the streets in Federation Square. They didn't seem like a very persuasive and intelligent political organization when we saw that. But you're absolutely right. Where actually, when Jay started mentioning the strategy of doing good works and charity operations, I was thinking about Hamas, and I think you're right to mention the similarities. That when you do get a group that is being more strategic and more intelligent about burrowing into the political system and becoming important aides and advisors to leading politicians, getting some of their own people elected to office, that's where they become much more effective and they actually make serious inroads. Some of it is I mean, we had a case in Canada, for example, where the World Sikh Organization, which is a separatist group, although they pretend otherwise, or at least they keep quiet about it. They said, "What do you mean separatists? There's nothing like that on our website." Oh, that's because they took it off their website, but they didn't change their constitution, which remains the same as the separatist organization. And they were campaigning at one point to edit and alter a national security report, a fairly routine thing by the Canadian government bureaucracy, which named the threat of Khalistani extremism as one of the threats that existed to Canada's national security. Not a very controversial statement, you might think, considering the grim history which we've already discussed. Nevertheless, the Liberal Party, which was in power, said, "Oh dear, we've upset the Sikhs." Again, they made that mistake. The Sikhs? No, you've upset the Khalistanis. Not the same thing, That's not a difficult concept to grasp, but for some reason they have extreme difficulty with that very simple concept of two things being different. Anyway, the point of the story is that they succeeded. And I agree with you, and I think you're correct and should pursue that part of the story, that the more strategic, the more politically smart, it may be a minority of the movement, but some of them really get it. They get politics in a way that some Canadian politicians don't. They say, "Well, I don't know what's going on in this community. I'm new here. I just won the nomination, and I won the nomination, as you can in Canada, we don't really have open primaries. What you have is a nomination meeting, and you sell as many memberships as you can. Brand new members who arrive at the meeting with a freshly photoshopped electricity bill to show that they supposedly live in the riding. The ink's still wet on this forgery, and then they all say, "Okay, who are we voting for?" And then there's some broker who paid for the bus to bring them to the meeting. They say, "Okay, we're all going to vote for whoever," and their guy gets in, and maybe they end up winning the seat. So this is how the game is played at the political level in Canada, And sure as damn it, it's going to be how it's going to be played in Australia if you allow it. But if you expose them, once you start saying, hold on a minute, how about this? How about that? How about these jackets? How about the guns? And what is your agenda? And when you say that you're not a Khalistani, why is it then that you're naming your campaign headquarters after this assassin? You know, why is it that you hold up Dilawar Singh as a suicide bomber as being a hero of your movement? And so you expose them, you challenge them. You may not make yourself popular at first, but you will make it very difficult for them to succeed. And it's because it's so easy for politicians to just let it all happen. You know, this guy's volunteering to, you know, move house from Vancouver and move 3 hours to Eastern Canada to come and be my deputy assistant secretary in my boring little parliamentary office. And he's energetic and he's willing to go out and lick envelopes and campaign and knock on doors for me. Great. Why should I not accept it? Well, there's a reason. Because once you start accommodating them, they'll swallow you in the end.
Pallavi?
Terry, I wanted to ask this question because, as you rightly said, that Khalistanis are not Sikhs. I mean, this is an absolute myth. And the Khalistan terrorism, it impacted both Hindus and Sikhs. I mean, thousands of Hindus and Sikhs were killed in that movement in the 80s in India. And we know about the Kanishka air bombing, which took over 300 lives, including lives of children. The problem, there's another problem which seems to have come up, and that is that because there seems to be this inherent bias in a large section of the media in the West against the current dispensation in India, it seems that it's become really difficult to get this message across because you see a lot of mainstream media not really highlighting the issue as Khalistani issue. They try to conflate it as, you know, a conflict between Hindus and Sikhs, which it is absolutely not. But because of this inherent bias but towards the ruling dispensation currently, it seems that a fake narrative is being peddled, and it's getting increasingly difficult to get this message across because of that. So, what would you like to say about that?
Well, I think what I would like to say about that is not necessarily going to be welcome to you. So I'm telling you now, you might not like my answer. India needs to grow up. Now, that is a presumptuous and arrogant thing for me to say. But nevertheless, you asked me what I believe. India needs to grow up and understand that democratic countries are not going to, as they constantly ask us to, lock up these Khalistanis, don't allow the referendum, shut them down. You know, I mean, free speech is legal in our countries. This is, not a hard concept to grasp. It is not a crime in Canada or Australia to go down the street with a yellow flag and say Khalistan Zindabad. That is not a crime. That is a human right. And Indian politicians, I think, do tend to do their own performative shtick, if you will, where it all sounds nice and macho to say, you know, we are calling upon Canada or Australia or Italy or whoever to crack down on these Khalistanis and stop this referendum. You can't stop people having a peaceful vote. That's just not how it operates. And it's long past time that Indian politicians should understand that. They need to be sophisticated too. That's not a problem. The problem is when it turns to violence. Now, the other thing you mentioned is and here I again will disappoint you perhaps, is that you perceive a bias in the Western media and Canada, Australia perhaps, about the current administration, the Modi government in New Delhi. I must tell you frankly that I share that bias, and I don't apologize for it. If you are going to act as Modi has with respect to the press and the judiciary, then you're not a friend of democracy, and you're going to be criticized for it. He's not holy and untouchable and beyond criticism because he wishes to be. I mean, grow up again. That's just, that goes with the territory. He is taking a risk that he will alienate friends of India, indeed fanatics of India. I mean, I've been hopelessly in love with India since I was 17 years old. I interviewed Indira Gandhi when I was 18 on a trip to India in 1967. And I've been going regularly ever since. And I mean, I sometimes say I wish I was an Indian. It was just it's a country of inexhaustible attractions and beauty and fascination. Having said that, I don't like the present government, and I think that the laws that some of the laws that Modi has introduced, I won't go on. It's not what this program is about, but I'm going to tell you that I share the prevailing bias in the Western world that the Modi government has gone too far, encroaching upon the legitimate rights of the media and of the judiciary and of some of his own people. I think that if I was a Muslim living in India today, I would have cause to worry. I don't think that's a biased statement, but if you want to call it a bias, I'm going to tell you that I share it. But on the important things, the integrity, the right of India to maintain its territorial integrity, and not to allow an independent state, I'm foursquare with India, and you have rightly identified the gaps in Western knowledge of what really happened. That it was not a war between Sikhs and Hindus in Punjab in the 1980s and early 90s. On the contrary, it was a war between crazy people and sane people, if you want to be blunt about it. So I'll leave it at that. But I just ask you to consider that India has not helped itself. For example, from the point of view of a Western Democrat, banning the referendum. Why is that illegal? Now, I know the Indian Constitution makes it constitutionally forbidden, really, for the government to contemplate the breakup of India. It's legally bound to defend the integrity of India's borders. But I'm not bound by the Indian Constitution. I can say what I like. And I think that it would be far better and would expose the Khalistanis to ridicule if you did what they do in Punjab every time they have an election and let separatists run. Let them have their referendum, and they will, I guarantee you, be like the dog that caught the car. You know that expression. If the dog does catch the car, it's probably going to get run over. Let's hope he doesn't catch the car, because if he does, it may only expose what a terrible, pitiful, weak level of support the Khalistanis have among Sikhs in India. And I cited a moment ago last year's election results in which they won no seats, 2.5% of the vote, an absolutely pitiful performance. And that was a good year. That was a really good year for them. The election before that in 2017, they got 0.3% of the vote, a fraction, not even a third of 1% in a Sikh majority state. So it's enough on that, but I don't intend to come and tell India how to run its affairs, but you asked, so I answered.
Okay, let me put Pallavi, one second, Pallavi. I'll put a couple of things in perspective in terms of Australia today. I really loved your criticism of government. Last 27 years, I have been taught as a journalist to criticize governments, and I love that in every bit. Okay. However, the bias which Amit was talking, and I repeatedly talk in my reports and other things, is when the Western media tries to portray India and in hide of criticizing Modi, they start criticizing Hindus and India. The India and Modi government are two different things, and Hindus and Modi governments are two different things. And Western media right now in last say 6, 7, 8 years, have lost that difference margin of line. They have started attributing anything to people like me who identify as Hindu. Whatever wrong is happening in India, I am responsible for that. And Panu is doing the same thing. He puts in his poster something which has happened in 66, and he tells that I am responsible for whatever has happened because I'm an offspring of Hindus. So this is what Panu is doing, exactly the same Western media is doing. And that's where the bias we talk about. Second thing, I have no issues in terms of, you said that support towards Khalistanis. The support is in the modern time after what has happened in Punjab Kisan Andolan, farmers' protests. The support has grown, and I'm seeing that support is growing among the diaspora also. You said that Simranjit Singh Mann, he got 2.5%. I think you have to update that in the last election, he got elected not only
the federal seat, yes.
He got elected by a thumping majority in that constituency by some 270,000 votes. He got voted. So it's not a surprise. The same constituency 10 years back when I was reporting there, he couldn't get much votes. So it's not that easy which we can close our eyes. Second thing, rightly so, there is freedom of speech in terms of Khalistan referendum. I have no issues with Khalistan referendum if they do, but I have an issue if you put a poster of suicide bomber who have killed my relatives on the streets of Melbourne, and you say that this is freedom of speech. My government in Australia, I should have all the rights to demand them, then shut this damn thing down. And I have no shame that government of Australia or government of Canada or USA should have that responsibility to shut that damn thing down. They cannot hide behind freedom of speech when these Turks glorify suicide bombers, murderers, and terrorists, if I can say that.
Well, we agree. We agree on your last point. We definitely agree. My point is simply that let them have their freedom of speech to say whatever crazy thing they do want to say about their holy suicide bombers, but I still have my freedom of speech to denounce them, to embarrass them, and to jam that mistake down their throats every chance I get, which is what I'm doing on this broadcast now. For example, I'm saying again and again, I come back to this. If these people seriously expect us to take them seriously and to support their project for an independent state, and not to be terrified of what kind of independent state that might be, then they had better stop glorifying suicide bombers. I draw the limit. So embarrass them. You know, when the cameras are rolling, you ask them about that, and don't let them wriggle off the hook. And you go after them because you have the freedom of speech. That's the problem that I see among the politicians. Certainly in Canada, I'll let you judge the Australians. That they don't want to make trouble, and they let things go by. They smile and wave at the parade, and they don't stand up and use their own. They say, "Oh well, look, I can't interfere. It's freedom of speech." Yeah, well, where's your freedom of speech? Why aren't you using it to say that we can't ban it? Legally we can't ban it. We can't lock them up for saying things we don't like. That's not how it works. But we can contradict them, and we can embarrass them, and we can deny them winning political power because they're making fools of themselves, and put it that bluntly. On your other points, I agree also about that. But it's not a very interesting program where we all agree.
Now, Terry, to conclude, Khalistan, the so-called land of the pure, this new nation would comprise of Punjab, Haryana, Himachal Pradesh, Rajasthan, and parts of Uttar Pradesh, with its capital in Shimla.
Yeah.
One of the things that I have noticed is, we have been pointing out it using history books, is that Shimla was never the capital of the Sikh Empire 250 years ago.
Oh, Lahore was, but not
Lahore
Shimla.
was in Punjab, Pakistan. Second, Shimla was the place where Pakistani army was made humiliatingly to sign a document of surrender. We say that, and you have been saying that, and others have pointed out that Khalistan is a pet project of ISI. The funding comes from Pakistan's ISI, and now they have become self-sustainable because you have, people who are donating. I don't know why they are attracted to the cause of Khalistan, but they're putting heaps of money. Maybe they can actually fund back Pakistan. They've got so much money now in the West, US, UK, Canada, and Australia, that the supporters can fund. Do you think that this dream will ever come true, that there will be a nation like Khalistan, and we will see mass bookings from people in Canada, USA, second, third generation Sikhs who will book a ticket and just move to Uttar Pradesh, Rajasthan, Bihar, Himachal, and to live a very happy, peaceful life as they are trying to promote through their posters and Pannu's videos, especially first paragraph. I won't go into the second paragraphs of Pannu's videos, but first paragraph, democratic, peaceful for everyone.
At last, somebody asked me an easy question. No, I don't believe it for a minute, and I'll tell you very, very briefly why. When it's an idea in the distance, it's an imaginary dream. Nobody's put any limits on it. Nobody's described what kind of state it would be. Nobody has said, is it a democracy? Is it a theocracy? How is it going to be? What's the constitution of this state? Nobody's even explained these new borders, as you rightly pointed out. Shimla? I mean, I've had cross swords with Khalistanis who've written to me and said, I'm crazy. I'm in the pocket of the Modi government, which apparently isn't the case. But anyway, and they say, well, the reason we're not having a referendum in Pakistan among Sikhs in Pakistan is because we only want to have the referendum where we're in a majority. Oh, are the Sikhs in a majority in Shimla? They're not even in a majority in Amritsar. Did you know that? I mean, it's just, they have no clue. Such a nebulous, ill-defined, undefined concept is very easy to support. I mean, how do you oppose it? It sounds like Khalistan. Oh, land of the pure. That'd be great. As long as you don't know what Pakistan means, which is the same thing, I think. But the gaps that exist in what the concept really means, the absence of edges, the absurdity that they don't want to have Khalistan in Nankana Sahib. That's only the birthplace of Guru Nanak, for God's sake. They don't want Lahore, the seat of Ranjit Singh's Sikh empire, which was mostly in what is now Pakistan. It makes no sense. It makes no sense at all. And I don't think that Canadians will be. I mean, I recently saw some video of a so-called truck rally in Brampton when they had a vote similar to what they're about to have another one in Australia. And they had a rally for support. And those were nice trucks. Those are $50,000 trucks riding down the road in Toronto. These people have good jobs and very shiny automobiles. And are they going to give all of that up to go back to what? I mean, if you ask them, they don't know. I mean, I did some digging when I was writing my book. Somebody must have written some sort of plan. Is there a constitution? Finally, I found one. I thought, this would be good. And I read it and said, it's going to be a democracy. Oh, it's going to be a free market democracy. This is great. Next paragraph. Non-Sikhs will not be allowed to take part in politics. This is a democracy? I mean, this is like this nutty referendum where right now they're allowing Sikhs over the age of 18 to vote. So it's determined by your religion. Wait a minute. I mean, we're not against referendums in Canada. We had a couple of referendums in Quebec. Did we ban it for everyone except French Catholics? I mean, the idea would have been absurd. It was never even contemplated. So the short answer is no, I do not believe either that Khalistan is going to come about. It's a fantasy concept for the purpose of raising donations and making people feel they've got street cred in their gang. And no, I don't think that they have any idea themselves what it's going to be like. I mean, whoever wrote this constitution was obviously an idiot. It's just laughable. And that's the best they've got at the moment for a constitution. If there is a better one, someone will write in after seeing this broadcast and correct me. Please send me a copy. That would be great. I won't hold my breath.
Yeah. Terry, my last question to you would be that what do you think are the geopolitical implications of this? Because while one can see them as isolated movements and maybe just a few people involved, but as you have noted, and which is fairly well known, that Pakistan's ISI is behind a lot of it, and this has the potential to derail bilateral relations between some countries and India, irrespective of which government is in power. And we know the kind of state that Pakistan has become. Unfortunately, it's a well-known state sponsor of terror, and one can see the situation there right now. What's happening there? So, my last question to you would be that what can be the geopolitical implications of this, and is it time that countries like Canada and now Australia realize that this is not just about the Indian diaspora or the Indian community living in these countries, but this is something that could potentially impact everyone going forward?
This is a very important question, and I'm glad you raised it because of the geostrategic importance, if you will. I mean, consider this, for example. This flows from what we were just talking about in the previous question. Consider this, that if there were to be, let's say I'm wrong, and Khalistan were to come into being, there'd be a new state. How would it operate? How would it operate without, it's not going to have the goodwill of India. We know that. They're not going to be best buddies, good neighbors. I don't think that's going to happen. They would be dependent on Pakistan. It would be a client state of Pakistan, with whom the Khalistanis are already allied in many ways. You've heard, about the K2 strategy, Kashmir and Khalistan. You know that a couple of ISI jihadists were along for the ride with Talvinder Parmar and his gang, heavily armed, when they were ambushed by the police in October of 1992, and all 6 of them died. And the Pakistani ISI guy, he was the one who was holding the money. So if there were to be a Khalistan, I think we can be quite confident that it's going to be a client state of Pakistan, which is itself not just a basket case, but also is a client state of China. Now, you asked what's the geostrategic implications of such an independent state? Well, I think they're almost unthinkable. I mean, already you have on India's northern border this constant drumbeat of a potential war. They attack each other with sticks once in a while because they're not supposed to fire guns, right? So it's now a sort of one front and 2 wars. What if it's one front and 1 war? And Pakistan has very few options, remember, right now. They can't possibly repay their debt to China or indeed to anyone else. So if Khalistan came into being, I believe that it would fall into the lap of Pakistan. Chaos would ensue. India would find it an intolerable situation if there were to be some sort of breakaway state, which again, I don't think this would happen, but if it were to happen, it would be a disaster strategically for India, and it would be absolutely intolerable. It would cut off India's land access to Kashmir. You wouldn't have to speculate about the K2 strategy anymore. It would be there writ large, right on your northern border. So I think it would be a catastrophe, not just for India, but for the region and for the world, if this were to happen, because of the environment. And any environment involving Pakistan is bad news as far as I can tell.
Terry, on behalf of the Australia Today team, I would like to thank you for sharing your precious time and views on the Khalistani movement and its implications for Australia. And I do hope that in future we'll get another opportunity to carry on the discussion and to see where this fantasy movement is going down under. Thank you.
Well, I'm very glad you had excellent questions today. You kept me on my toes. Thanks a lot. I enjoyed it.
Thank you so much.